right, we are at 1 o'clock. It is time to get started. Welcome out, everyone. We are in for... Could y'all see Dragon Con today? We are here to talk about COVID and the zombie apocalypse. So, yeah, well, it's like a lot of fiction treats zombies like a communicable disease. And now, having lived through a pandemic for the past 2.5 years, seems like we've probably learned a few lessons about what fiction gets right and what fiction gets wrong. So, say what? Like how to wear masks. Yes, which is actually an important thing. Please, everyone, keep your masks on here during the entire panel. We are going to invite the people up here to take them off for interpretive purposes. It makes it easier for y'all to hear us, and for people who need lip reading, it makes that easier as well. So any of the panelists who want to take their masks off may. If you do not feel comfortable, do not feel obligated to do so. And yes, I realize there's some irony in that given the topic of the panel, but so be it. So, quick introductions first. I am Jason Wallace. I'm a professor in plant genetics at the University of Georgia. And I'm going to throw this out to the panelists. I want each of you to give your favorite zombie or pandemic-related media. And mine is the board game Pandemic Legacy Season 1, which has been the favorite board game I've ever played. So, pass on.
Hey everybody, my name's Charlie Kaufman. I have a background in marine biology, environmental studies, and applied GIS computer mapping. For the past 7 or so years, I've been in the emergency management field, responding to things like hurricanes, wildfires, pandemics. When I'm not doing a real world job, some of you may know if you were at my talk, last year, I model fun things like Godzilla attacks, zombie outbreak models, and Sharknado predictions. And my favorite zombie medium, I'm a classic. I will always go back to the original black and white, Night of the Living Dead.
Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Brandon Strauss. I am a forensic entomologist. I also specialize in medical entomology and veterinary entomology and palynology, study of pollen, microparticles.
You need to get closer to the mic.
To get closer? Oh, can you
Yes,
hear me now?
you have to eat the microphone.
I have to eat the microphone. That's fun. Do I need to go over everything again? So I'm a forensic entomologist, medical entomology, veterinary entomology, and palynology, study of pollen. My favorite media, I would say, is like Dead of Night by Jonathan Mayberry, but that's because it uses jewel wasps for the zombie virus, and I'm kind of biased towards insects.
Hi everyone, I am Dr. April Arms, and I am a microbial geneticist and ecologist. I work in a plant synthetic biology lab where I intentionally kill plants. Sorry, Jason. And for my favorite, I guess like zombie pandemic related media, anything kind of like comedy, horror comedy. I really like Ash versus the Evil Dead. Yeah. And also playing Plague Inc. for board games. That's a good one.
Hi everybody, my name is Savannah Miller. I am a public health professional by training. I have my master's in public health from Emory University right down the street. Yeah, go Eagles, woo! And so I have a lot of background in academic research in the public health world and have studied sorry, this microphone is like reverberating. Okay, I'm so sorry. Various different public health things, but right now I currently work in the vaccines division for a international pharmaceutical company, and so I do vaccine sales. So I've kind of moved into more of the business side of public health. So I interact with a lot of physicians and nurses and other healthcare professional staff on a daily basis to help meet their population vaccination needs. And favorite, I guess, more so pandemic-related media I really love is a podcast called This Podcast Will Kill You. Yeah. It's a great podcast. Yep, so highly recommend.
Yep.
All right, thank you. So the plan for this panel is we've got a few things. We're going to talk about how diseases get started, what makes a disease, how a pandemic becomes a pandemic, how we as society respond, and kind of chalk up a scorecard of how does our media do? What did they get right? What did they get wrong? Before launching to that, I do want to set out some ground rules. Like, we're going to talk a lot about pandemics and COVID-19 in this panel, which means we're going to talk about things like mask mandates and vaccinations and conspiracy theories and misinformation and government shutdowns and all sorts of stuff like that. This panel is not a political soapbox. Please, we're here to have fun. We're not here to argue about whether these things were necessary, how well they worked or did not work, or anything like that. We're just taking as a given, these things happened. Therefore, if there is a zombie plague outbreak, they will probably also happen. And that's what we're taking as the baseline here. Whether or not you agree with these things, I think we can just trust that stuff that happen in life can inform our fiction, and we can hold that mirror up. So let's all just agree to have fun here. And with all right, and so with that, we are going to throw out the first question. What makes a disease? What makes something like a disease start?
Okay, I guess I'll take this one as the microbiologist. So I've thought about this a little bit, and there are a lot of different things that incorporate a disease, not just viruses, although that is pretty common. So bacteria can cause disease. Toxins, which are produced by bacteria, can cause disease, and obviously viruses can cause disease. Also, trying to think of some prions, if you guys are familiar with those are misfolded proteins, can cause diseases, and even your own bodies can cause disease, so autoimmune diseases as well when your body attacks your own cells. So disease is a very broad category, not just limited to one particular microbe.
You also have parasites and other such things that are going to burrow into your body and cause a reaction that is not fun.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess when it comes to disease, right, we can also differentiate the disease actor itself, right, the virus or the parasite or et cetera, that's the entity, organism causing an issue, and then the disease symptoms, like what's happening to you when you are actually getting that organism inside your body, whatever it may be. So I think that also makes a disease is characterizing whatever organism might be causing a disease, and then also characterizing what happens in your body, how your body reacts to it, because that's going to also affect your health, right? That's, what we were talking about earlier. Tons and tons of microbes out there are good microbes. They do good things to you when we want them in our body and on our body to do all the good things. So it's important to not only characterize the organism itself, but also what it does to your body, if it's good or bad.
And if any of us have lived in the South during pollen season, we all walk around looking like zombies. So.
All right. And so where do diseases come from? So when a new disease appears on the scene, where does it come from?
So from a microbial aspect, something like less than 5% of microbes that are on Earth are actually responsible for causing disease in the human body. So it's a very, very, very relatively small number. And then you have things like viruses. When they come into play, anyways, apparently my brainwaves are messing with the microphones. So with viruses, there are a lot of different ways that they can cause disease in human bodies. One thing to keep in mind is that viruses are very specific to their hosts. And not only are they specific to their host, as in like whether they infect a human or some other type of animal, but they are so specific that they infect particular cells in your body as well. So you've got a whole range of different viruses that will attack the upper respiratory system or your digestive system and various other parts of your body. Some viruses attack your skin cells, right? So when we're thinking about where disease comes from, again, lots of different sources, and how do they emerge, lots of different places as well. I think another way that they can emerge is through, well, there's several different routes of transmission, right? So, again, regarding viruses, let's take the common cold, for example. So, when you are infected with the common cold, that virus is specific to your upper respiratory system. And so when you cough or sneeze, you're going to be spreading that virus. So those are transmitted through fluids and droplets from your cough and sneeze. And then when you are infected with something, let's say like Ebola, that virus, it infects the lower or the gut, right? So what it does is it kills the epithelial cells in your gut, causing diarrhea. And if you live in a place that has poor plumbing, or if you're like at a yes, it circles back essentially. So imagine that, you know, your only place to use a restroom is the river. Well, that's the same drinking source of water for the rest of the community as well. So this is called the oral fecal route. The same thing could happen at like a water park if somebody is sick at the water park, right?
Don't get Ebola at the water park. Don't do it.
Right. So it's not just limited to third world countries is what I'm, I guess, trying to get at there. So yeah, what was the question again? I know. I did, yeah.
So
sorry.
the question was about origin of diseases, and you actually set up a really good question there, because you talk about how specific viruses are, and yet we keep hearing about avian influenza jumping to humans, SARS-CoV-19 probably coming from bats to humans or something to humans, like all these things jumping. So how does that jumping happen?
Oh yeah, so that happens through zoonotic diseases, right? So again, viruses are very specific to their host, right? So this is actually really fun and interesting. We've got viruses, right? Animals have viruses. Bacteria have viruses. Viruses have viruses. Everybody has viruses. So I think that is just a really fun thing to think about. But also,
That's fun to think about. That's fun to think about.
It's
Okay.
viruses all the way down.
yeah, viruses all the way. Even viruses have viruses. So when we're talking about zoonosis, which is when a virus is infecting an animal, and then that can jump to humans. So this usually only happens when humans are in close contact with that animal. So it happens with like birds. It happens with domestic species. So if we think about COVID-19, right, this is a SARS-CoV-2 type virus, and there have been other SARS viruses, and even the Middle Eastern variant, which was much more recent, the MERS virus, right? So the Middle Eastern respiratory virus. And so that I think originated in camels, right, as the mixing vessel. So that is something that humans were in close contact with in the Middle East were these camels. And so what essentially happens with zoonotic diseases, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, it's that a human is sick with a virus, right? And then an animal is sick with a different virus. And there is an event in an intermediate host where the two viruses essentially meet, exchange genetic information, and then is able to transmutate into a virus that can infect a human. And so that's how you get these viruses that essentially jump to humans.
This is why insect vector diseases are really bad, because you have mosquitoes, and mosquitoes take multiple blood meals from multiple sources, and they're picking up viruses and bacteria. And we actually say ticks, if they had wings, would be worse than mosquitoes. Like mosquitoes can carry up to like 2 or 3 pathogens at a given time. Ticks have 12, 18, 20, and they sit and wait. But imagine winged winged ticks. Like, just, nah.
All right, so time to bring in the zombies. So, zombie plagues, zombie communicable diseases. Where would you start? Like, if you wanted to take some sort of disease or something that's out there right now and turn it into a zombie plague, hypothetically speaking, please, where would you start? What would you do to create what we see, whether it's the rage virus or whether it's the Night of the Living Dead thing? Like, how would you create a zombie plague?
I would start by playing Plague Inc.
Well, that question defines what type of zombie you want. What type of zombie do you want? Because I consider the fast 28-day zombies an invasive species. The traditional zombies, you know, the original horror movie zombies were these slow, stumbling, rotting corpses. And the fast zombies were these speedy things. And if you watch the two different types of movies, the infection of the two zombies were different. The original Night of the Living Dead Romero zombies, that was a bite from a zombie and only a bite. The infection started to spread. I likened it in my zombie model to be more of a bite of a Komodo dragon. The bite started to necrotize, you got very sick, and you died. The 28-day zombies, if you watch the movie or any of the fast zombie, more modern movies, it's infection of any fluid. You know, you get blood on it, the zombie spits in you. That's viral transmission. So what zombie do you want, first off, you know?
I think we're being evil here, though.
Yeah.
Like, that's so. I mean,
This is dual-use research.
Yeah.
I'm sure the
okay,
government's
okay.
perfectly fine with it.
I'd probably say that. So we touched on like how to create a zombie, right? Get that weird, gross-looking zombie out in there. I think if I was to go more so on the like mass chaos that happens with zombie apocalypses, right? I think I might go the bioterrorism route, right? How many of you heard of bioterrorism? Yeah, majority of you. Does anybody like can think of any specific type of bioterrorist events that have happened? Anthrax is a very well-known one. Yep, ricin. Yep. So when it comes to like zombie apocalypse, mass chaos, I think we would go bioterrorism route, and specifically now. I am not suggesting we do this in any way possible, so please nobody think that this is me promoting this.
We are not a league of evil
No,
scientists.
no.
Wait,
But
that's not what my business card says?
But what might ensue mass chaos could be bringing back the one human disease that we had completely eradicated, that being smallpox, which we have already now seen a bit with monkeypox and the issues with our smallpox vaccine stores having been destroyed and or expired, right? And because of that, we have a very low store of smallpox vaccines, and it takes time to make vaccines. Now, what one could do, I won't say relatively easily, but to create a bioterrorist event, one could take said smallpox virus, which there are labs out there that are not supposed to have it and do have it that we do not know of, because there are only supposed to be, I think, 2 labs in the world that hold smallpox, like legally. But I can guarantee you it's probably out there somewhere else, is to mutate said smallpox virus so that whatever vaccines we have for it and are currently making are not useful to it anymore. And so that, I think, would create mass chaos, right? We'll have a giant pandemic event that would ensue mass chaos, therefore simulating a zombie apocalypse, right? Now, smallpox itself, when you get it, you're not going to necessarily act like a zombie, per se, but I think that would be the whole, like, mass chaos, world-ending zombie apocalypse thing, if that makes sense.
Gotta add some aspects of rabies in there, and then you'll really get the zombie stuff going.
The other thing to consider is where you release this. There's a fantastic book, if you can find it, called Night of the Living Trekkies, and somebody released a zombie plague at a sci-fi show, and people were getting infected because they were walking up to the zombies convinced there was fantastic cosplay. So if some evil scientist released the zombie plague at a large sci-fi convention, it would spread very quickly because everybody would walking up going, "Can I get a picture?"
Yeah, down at Spooky, down in Florida, it's just a horror convention. Just do it at horror conventions. I would be I'd be the one person, because I'm biased. I do insect-borne, because mosquito management is one of the hardest things to do. Every time, this cup of water could reproduce a couple thousand mosquitoes alone. Every cap, every tarp from your construction thing that your husband or partner said that they were going to do last year, but it's been like 5 years and it's just collected water, mosquitoes, right? We've trying everything we can to reduce the amount of insect-borne illness, and mosquitoes kill more humans than any other animal in the world. They are the number one killer of humans, even more than us on each other. We love to kill each other. It's our favorite pastime. So I would go insect-borne, and there's even mosquitoes in like Nearctic places, up in Canada, into Russia. So nowhere is safe unless you're like a penguin all the way down. Not for long.
I think something also to consider when you are trying to start a zombie apocalypse is if you're using some sort of microbial vector to do so, you also have to consider how to tweak that vector from, I guess, mutating in a way, because the thing about viruses and also bacteria is that their goal is not to kill their host. A bad disease-causing organism will kill its host. A good disease-causing organism will leave its host alive so it can continue to reproduce and infect the next host. There's a question. Can we take?
This is something that came up in a similar panel a few years ago about how toxoplasmosis actually is fantastic because it takes the small host prey animal and actually removes their fear of the larger predator.
Right.
So mice lose their innate fear of cats
Yep.
when they have toxo,
Yeah.
and then it lets it jump pretty
All the way through, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the comment was on toxoplasmosis, which is a parasite of mice that actually infects their brain and removes their fear of predators like cats. And so the toxoplasmosis is essentially mind controlling the rodent to make it more likely to pass on the toxoplasmosis.
Do we get to talk about parasites now? Because I love parasites.
Yes, we can. I actually wanted to segue into how things get transmitted, and it seems like we're doing pretty well there.
Yeah.
So we've talked about insects and bites and stuff. What are the different ways that one, diseases get transmitted, that zombie diseases have been shown? Because I don't think they've explored the full area there, and how that stacks up, again, with our real-life experience of a pandemic and trying to prevent a disease from being transmitted.
Yeah. I think we've already talked a little.
Well, the model I built, and I went different because there's other zombie models. I wasn't the first. I'd like to claim it, but all the actual like epidemiological bacteria, scientists, they all do these epidemiological models, and that's basically how diseases are actually spread. I wanted to have fun with the zombies, so I took animal migration models. So it's the same modeling that actually tracks like how elephants wander across Africa or how birds travel across large countries. So I got a bunch of students from the College of Charleston, and I timed them to do a zombie walk down the hallway and averaged it all out. And then I put that timing into the animal migration modeling pattern, and then I mapped all this out to do zombie walking distances, and then calculated, if zombies meet a prey item every so often, and that prey item turns, and then continued calculating out the zombies. And I was able to wipe out the entire city of downtown Charleston within 24 to 72 hours. And that's the simple bite model radius of zombies shuffling around, and that's just the migration modeling. Now, you expand that out to the actual disease spread and how fast it goes, you can really, exponentially wipe out a major metropolitan area.
Right. So I think we've already talked a little bit about how diseases spread through like the oral fecal route.
I
That's
just want to keep saying
I-
oral
I-
fecal route.
It is.
Enjoy
Well,
it.
it is kind of fun. But also through coughs and sneezes. But bringing up the bite scenario, that is also a primary way that like rabies is spread, right? From, you know, an infected animal to humans is through saliva specifically. So I think as far as transmission goes, like, it really depends on the organism that's being used for that.
So I think this also brings up the question, right? So if, say we have an insect vector model, right, that causes zombies, and then we have the zombies obviously are spreading it through a bite model as well. What about, and then we could throw in the fluid discharge on top of that. Discharge is a wonderful word, because now we've seen zombies that are like Resident Evil style and all these other, you know, giant mutations and zombie
All
dogs
pussy.
and pussy, like it's a wonderful word. And so-
Can zombies cough and sneeze? You never see that though. You never just see one just
I mean,
hacking one up in the.
outside of the World War Z zombies, most zombies should be gone after 6 weeks because of decomposition. So, I mean, we have to arrest some belief here, all right?
That's where we're drawing the line.
I mean, a little bit. Listen, I have yet, but outside of World War Z, because you brought this up in the emails, was
Well, the
like,
question is do zombies like breathe? You know, like if they
Do they
don't
need to?
breathe,
I mean,
do they
it's-
need to? If they don't breathe, then they don't need to cough or sneeze.
I mean, it's just a virus controlling the entire thing, or it could be, you know, insect larvae controlling it.
Fungal spores.
Or it could be
Fungal spores.
fungi or bacteria.
Does the disease itself need the host to breathe? Right? Or does it arrest decomposition?
I
at
mean, if
certain
it's a
point?
microbe, it probably doesn't need the host to breathe.
Zombie ants.
Got some questions here, and then over there.
Yeah, so I had a question for Charlie. Oh, all right. Thanks. I have a question for you, Charlie, about your model. Did your zombie travel times, were those fast or slow zombies, or did you use both with a sensitivity analysis?
They were slow zombies because I consider fast zombies an invasive species.
Like zebra mussels just everywhere.
My favorite zombie media are ones that have a fungal model, like Girl with All the Gifts and Chuck Wendig's Wanderers.
Yes.
And I'm wondering your thoughts on those sorts of things, as well as the climate change is melting things and introducing old spores and old things that we haven't seen in.
There's actually a panel about climate change later.
Oh, very fun.
The fungal that does the zombie ants is one of the most fascinating organisms on the planet. If you've ever read up on it, there's a mold fungus spore organism that will infect a ant mound. Yeah, and basically it grows these weird, there's some fascinating, like now high resolution electron scanning microscope pictures of it, but it forces these almost extra antennae off the ant, and it will control the ant's movement, and it actually will spread the ants out, and that's how it's infecting other ant colonies. So it actually force marches the ants out, and it takes over the rudimentary, like, skills of the ant's brain to say, no, I'm making you walk over this way. So they're zombie ants, and it's wiping out certain ant colonies, and it's the most fascinating thing in the world.
And there's a bacteria that helps fight it.
So the
fight the fungal.
cordyceps fungus is actually a whole group of fungi that in the South Americas, it's not just ants. Every single insect has a cordyceps fungus that can infect it and zombify it. So the terrifying thing is that we do not know a lot about fungi. Like, you can go to, and I'm pretty sure Jason can talk about this because he's a little bit like fungi plant overlap, is, no, don't talk about fungi. We don't know anything about fungi. Like, they're terrifying. I have friends of mine who try to study it as a control mechanism for insects, and they say the fungi will take over the world because they're not a plant, they're not an animal, we don't know what they are.
All fungi are edible. Some of them are only edible once.
Yep.
And if I could add, just on the, as the public health person with, we do the whole prevention of everything, overlook of all the things. when it comes to the climate change increasing risks of various infectious diseases, it's because we're increasing our risk of being in contact with animals and other vectors, right? Because I think we may have mentioned earlier, like majority of infectious diseases are zoonotic, right? Majority of them out there are zoonotic, which means they're going to be having animal hosts and human hosts, and they can cross over and have those spillover events. And so with climate change and also globalization of all, urbanization and everything encroaching on habitats that we have not encroached on before, we're increasing our risk ourselves of emerging infectious diseases by doing that. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, range expansion is a thing.
Back there.
So, oh, wow, sorry. My question actually kind of has to do with the zoonotic origins of the disease and also the cordyceps. So my favorite zombie media is The Last of Us, which is based off of the cordyceps fungi from the ants. How realistic would it possibly be for a mosquito to be a common vector for that to infect humans?
All right, okay. So, well, there are ones that have to overlap. The cordyceps fungus are really specific to the specific insect that they infest. So, someone on the League of Evil Scientists would really have to modify that, like
We don't
Umbrella
talk about the
or
League.
something, and generally engineer that so that one, it does not take over the mosquito host, but prefers to humans as a host, right? But because the cordyceps fungi is really specific to that, there'd have to be a lot of genetic engineering that goes on.
My question was, with the zombies not needing to breathe, would we have to not have water stopping them and then just coating the planet by walking the whole place?
I mean, ocean zombies. You don't know what's down there. I mean,
Put down that anchor. Oh, what's coming up?
yeah, exactly.
I mean, they happen in Minecraft, so why not?
I'll take one or two more questions and we'll move on, but we'll have more spot for questions at the end.
You mentioned that
That's
genetic
a
engineering
nightmare.
would be required to actually modify fungi. Right now, there's CRISPR technology, so is it actually possible?
So we have to know their like DNA, right? We have to have mapped it out. We need to know how the cordyceps, what's coding for its behavior, and we haven't done that yet. It simply hasn't been focused upon because we're right now trying to more fix the agricultural system than anything. I mean, eventually, yeah, it's down the line. CRISPR is an easy tool, like easy peasy lemon squeezy. Anybody get into this room, anyone could learn it. So maybe.
Hi, my question, bringing the two topics together, like, zombies to current pandemic and real world situations, how would we really, at what point would we define that? And I'm thinking, because we're now finding that people with a long COVID retain that brain fog, and as a chronic migraine sufferer, I can tell you the brain fog is more debilitating than the headaches even. Yeah. And in a way, could that even be considered? Like, it's making us foggy and confused and dumb. At what point do we say, wow, we kind of have crossed over into zombies, just maybe not as extreme as Walking Dead or Resident Evil, but it's there.
That's a good perspective.
That is, yeah.
I was
I
like,
mean,
Well, I guess if we're going by like the science fiction definition of zombies, then no. But I mean, you bring up great points about long COVID and that it is something that we are going to continue studying, right? Because I mean, I as well. I mean, mine is distorted smell and taste. I had COVID back in November 2020, and everything still tastes completely different and smells different, which can have its own different effects of the psychology of smells and things like that. So. Exactly, and your daily life and how you live. And so while I don't think we define long COVID or other similar, diseases as like a zombie disease, I think it is interesting to consider because, I don't know, I think a lot of the times media loves to do the whole big flashy, like this big crazy disease, but you don't see much talking about the long-term effects of many different health issues, such as long COVID and a bunch of other things.
But I'll tiptoe right up to the line. I think split the hair of like saying, okay, the sci-fi horror version of zombie, but if you go back to the Haitian voodoo definition of zombie, that is sort of the non-sensory type, and you could end up with people that are just there. And maybe we need to use the zombie, translation of it and say, well, we've hit people that unfortunately have gotten to that level. They're not running around biting people and skin sloughing off yet, but we've hit a area where it's blending.
Yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, we kind of almost had that, not the biting crazy zombies, but with the sleeping sickness from the flu pandemic in 1918, where there were, people were put into comas and couldn't wake up at all. That's almost reminiscent of not biting zombies, but just essentially being quote unquote dead, living dead, right? Where you can't wake up from this sleeping sickness from the flu that you got. That was 1918, crazy pandemic.
All right, now I want to transition to social response, because even though in this room we may have more or less experience with biology and stuff and about how viruses work, we're all very well acquainted with how society responds to a pandemic. And so the real thing here, this is where I want to hold up the mirror between fiction and reality. When we look at how we actually respond to a pandemic, and we look at how those responses are shown in media, what does media get right? What does media get wrong?
I'll defer to the public health or the model.
I will be the first to. I work in the emergency management world. I am not a frontline responder. I'm not a first responder. I'm classified as a third line responder. And I'd say that if you ever see me running at you with a med kit and a green T-shirt, something has gone horribly wrong. That being said, I was activated at the beginning of the COVID-19 outbreak, and we went activated for over a year and a half of 14-hour shifts, and I wasn't treating people. I was sitting in an office building just modeling what was going on. It was rough. It was stressful, and I was just crunching numbers. I was not in a hospital wearing full gear helping people. So the reactions that I saw, it wasn't pleasant. So and emergency managers, we all have a very warped sense of humor, and it's sort of a defense mechanism. But if the next zombie movie comes out, does not have a bunch of people running toward the zombies because they don't believe it's happening, I'm not going to buy into it.
Yeah. There's lots of things I think you can compare between like social response to zombie apocalypse and to COVID-19 pandemic or any other pandemic that we might see in the future, which we will see more.
Collect the whole set. We have one pandemic out of 5. Collect the whole set.
I know, seriously. Oh my God. I know. I've now had.
For valuable prizes. Get a T-shirt.
Right. Now, as a public health person, I've now had the swine flu and COVID. So I'm like checking my boxes as public health. Get my pandemic.
3 more for bingo.
Yeah, really. Oh yeah. Hopefully, I can skip that one. Ooh. Anyways, I feel like when traditional zombie apocalypse stuff we see is it's very fast acting where just the whole world descends into chaos within like a week, and then there's only like 1% of people alive left that are normal human beings. So I think that's a major difference, and like I don't think it's very realistic even to see like a Station 11 type pandemic where again like 99% of the population dies within 48 hours. But to the point made earlier, I think it would another difference, interestingly, is that whole I don't believe that zombies are a real thing, even though they're walking right past me right now and in my face. Like, why would I do any preventative measure to not be infected by this zombie? I haven't seen that in any zombie movies. I don't know if anybody has before. Any zombie, anything. Usually people are like, ooh, don't touch me. That's a crazy zombie and whatnot. But I also think maybe one similarity, and at least what I think of like, World War Z, where they were trying to study a like cure and whatnot. Like that happens in real life too, right? We're studying not a cure to COVID, but we have the vaccine, we have preventative behavioral measures we can implement as well. So I think that's a similarity when it comes to like zombie apocalypse, some zombie apocalypse media and what we're doing in a pandemic is the studying to actually prevent it from happening in the future and hopefully prevent what's currently happening. So to protect human health, right?
A one good similarity, if any of you guys, I was doing it because it's my job and I'm a map geek at the same time, the John Hopkins map that was out.
Yeah.
That was a fascinating map that was tracking all the outbreaks that started with the U.S. and they got popular and went across the world. And if you were in my field, you could break it down to your local area. But that was a very fascinating map. We would create digital dashboards that you could use for your own area. You see that type of map in every outbreak movie, every zombie movie, every emergency movie. They don't work that fast in real life. Like, it takes a lot of effort to build that, although that's the exact type of thing you see. You just see the tech guy go, look, it's up, we're tracking it all. But at least that was similar, and I'm like, okay, cool, I get it. And they had the cool black background with the red lettering, and it looked all spooky, and like, that was real life. It was just taking the amount of stuff behind that to make it work was amazing. So that, in some ways, I'm like, yeah, cool, they're doing it right. This is what the movies show, but the movies show it happening instantaneously.
Yeah.
They're not going to put a time card up that says like 4 months later.
Disease reporting, I mean, it differs depending on state. So some states report on certain diseases and some do not. Some diseases are reportable, required to be reported to the CDC for statistics. Some are not. You also have, not everybody who does get sick with a disease goes to a hospital or doctor where it then is actually reported. And different states have different reporting mechanisms, like I could go on a whole rant about data science and how right now it's kind of a mess with how the interconnectedness of data sharing and also data compatibility is just not there right now. And so, to the point where, zombie apocalypse, oh, look, we can track everything and we know what's happening. That doesn't happen in real life.
Someone's sitting on proprietary data and they don't want to share it because they want a publication out in like a week. Like, it's just.
Yeah.
I think part of that, though, like the hiding of the bite,
Oh, yeah.
that's a behavior as well
Yeah.
that we've seen. That's really accurate because we've seen people be like, oh, yeah, sorry, I had COVID the entire time that I was at your house for, the christening. Like, it's,
you get your coworker that shows up and is like dying of the flu, and he's like, I'm saving my time off so I can go to the beach. And like, snot's like bleeding. Like, how the?
Yeah. That's going to be a ribbon for next year.
Yeah.
All right, I want to open it back up to questions out here. So who's got questions?
I have a question for the panel real quick, actually.
Okay.
All right. My favorite zombie films are the Return of the Living Dead. And they've got this material called trioxin that apparently if it just touches you, gets into like your eyes or anything like that, it turns you into one. And even like setting off a nuclear explosion just acts as a improved vectoring for it. So is there anything like that, or is that pure fiction?
It's called bath salts.
Well, as far as touch goes, diseases can spread through touch, and again, that's normally close contact through bodily fluids. But sweat is a bodily fluid, so I would think that it is possible that disease could spread through that touch, but disease spreading through a nuclear thing, I don't think is possible because nuclear things. Yeah.
Prions take a while.
They do, yeah. And usually that's through ingestion, as far as I know.
I think the fastest acting in that regard would probably be a drug delivery system, somebody crocodile or something like that.
Or I thought of measles. I mean, that's highly infectious. You get in a room 8 or 9 out of the 10 people in that room are gonna get measles. So, yeah.
Hey, so I think something highly uncovered by media when it comes to zombies is island nations usually. There's a game called Dying Light, which is one of my favorite zombie medias. And in the first one, not in the second one that just came out, but in the first one, the virus is just kept to a city on an island. And I feel like in an actual zombie apocalypse, I mean, if you've seen World War Z, it's kind of hard to be on a plane with zombies. And So like, I would think that like New Zealand or Australia or Iceland or Cyprus, like different countries might be safer.
Well, you start on Madagascar, and when you play Pandemic, always.
So I guess that would depend on how, like, the different type of zombie disease we're talking about, because I think that depending on how fast, like, the infection sets in, right? Because there are some zombie media where it takes time in order for that infection to set in and for the person to turn into a zombie. So you could think about it if, like, you know, an infected person is on the plane and it takes, I don't know, 16 hours for infection to set in, then they could reach their destination to those islands and then begin spreading. But if it's a quick acting zombification, then yeah, the plane would just crash into the middle of the ocean.
And that actually, there were some real world examples about that. There were some South Pacific island nations that went an entire year into the pandemic before their first case. So they learned about it, locked down quickly, and said, no, we're staying clean. And they almost made it. And then, you know, somebody snuck in, or My favorite story, because that's why they canceled all the cruise ships, and you heard all the stories about people getting locked down. My favorite story about that is one of the cruise ships outside of New Zealand, Australia, because they were doing the same thing. Somebody on a cruise ship, there was a wine drone delivery service, and they were getting wine delivered to their stateroom on the side of the ship. I'm like, hey, if you're going to get locked down, that's the way to go.
Right.
You know?
Can I have that for my house?
Yeah.
Also, I think it depends on, again, like the mechanism, right? Is it bite-only zombie, or is it my insect-borne stuff? Because insects get carried on winds. Like I can have a mosquito, you know, in Australia show up in China, you know, in a few days. So if it's an insect-borne disease, yeah, you ain't shutting down. We're just all screwed.
My favorite book is Sleepless by Charlie Houston. Have any of you read that one? The main premise on it is that the entire world has been infected with a prion-like disease through GMO foods. Do you think that kind of thing would work for a zombie vector?
Prions are weird. We don't know enough about them, I feel like, well, me as a microbiologist, I certainly don't know enough about them to make an assessment on that.
Yeah, I know Jonathan Mayberry's first Joe Ledger book, Patient Zero, uses prions and uses sleeping sickness and mad cow disease, and he went off into some sci-fi areas, and we really don't know enough. Like, you'd have to do protein editing for something like that to be picked up, and I don't think a prion would be integrated properly into a modified,
like a vector or something,
like a modified food system or anything like that. I know a little bit about plant stuff, but someone on this panel knows a little bit more about plant stuff than I do.
Well, so short version is like, it could be a one. The fact that, I mean, GMOs specifically, since there's so much strong feelings about them, which this panel is not about, let's just say it wouldn't hit all the world. But also, just because of the regulation route, GMOs are actually the most tested foods in existence. So it's unlikely they would be able to slip past that if it went through the actual official government channels. Some sort of bioterrorism incident, however, might be able to do that.
Just picturing someone planting corn, like, illegally.
Hello. So my favorite zombie media is the Left 4 Dead video games. And, you know, in those games you have different variants of zombies that you have to fight. As we've seen with COVID, this disease has, you know, mutated, and we have all these multiple variants now. Could that be what caused those types of changes to the zombies in the game? And we also see with COVID that when it mutates, the older versions tend to be overwhelmed. We don't see Delta anymore for the most part, because Omicron and its variants have taken over. So, you know, putting aside gameplay versus story mechanics trope, shouldn't in the game universe some of those variants, some of those types of the zombies been gone because the variant that created them been overwhelmed by the other newer variants?
Oh, I 100% think so. Yeah. Like if you're having like the bruisers or any the witches or something like that, those are just stronger variants.
Yeah.
They would spread more, and the basic walkers would be gone, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say it's like super common, but we see plenty of times where there's a virus or different organism that, depending on the variant or serotype, causes a different disease or symptoms in your body. The one that I think of like right off the top of my head is human papillomavirus. It can go from causing nothing at all, most people clear it, to causing genital warts, to causing cancer. So depending on what strain you're infected with for human papillomavirus. So yeah, very likely. Yeah.
I'd like to ask one of y'all to flip your brain around from being a normal, rational person to speculate on what kind of zombie misinformation we could expect, like we see from certain segments of society, like maybe let's put zombies to work, they're not so bad. What
Wait, wasn't that in Shaun of the Dead with the Walmart, like the zombie cart?
Sorry?
Wasn't that in Shaun of the Dead with the zombie
Yeah.
cart pushers? Yeah.
but what kind of, seriously, what kind of, if we did have that, what kind of information do you think we could expect?
I think they could kind of be like drones almost, right? Like a little delivery service zombies. Yeah, that could be possible.
Oh, let the zombies fight in the military for you. Send zombie units overseas, the first, zombie airborne division. No, don't do that, because then they just splat.
Zombie forgot to pull a shooting.
But I mean, so as far as misinformation goes, I think one, as we've stated before, is that we might have, people thinking like, oh, there's not a zombie apocalypse. There's not, like, zombies don't exist. They're just people who have a skin condition, and they really need to eat raw meat.
Or like, I think Resident Evil has shown this, Dying Light touched upon this, where there was like a big misinformation campaign. It's like, oh, it was just a really bad flu pandemic or something. That's why we shut down this city or nuke this city in the case of Raccoon. Or like, and there was a cover up like, oh, this didn't happen, or like there is a terrorist cell here, something like that. We would see somebody in, Publix just bit someone. He was on bath salts, and then zombie outbreak. You'd see something like that.
Or you go the other end of the spectrum, and zombies are people too. You have to start have ADA compliance. You have to have special. They have to be treated correctly. We have to make sure the zombies are treated. We can't have anti-bullying campaigns against the zombies. They have to be accepted into society. Anti-shooting campaigns, If it's undead, is it still murder if you shoot it?
That's the moral philosophy of zombies.
So I had read this series called it was the Noose Flesh trilogy by Mira Grant, and the idea was that they had created two vaccines, one that cured the common cold, one that cured cancer, but when they gave these people the vaccines, they kind of like the combination of the two within the body ended up causing zombification. So you kind of wonder, listen. But the idea is kind of like, I think, with now with the COVID-19 vaccines, just thinking about that, but like, what are your thoughts on like that kind of, like, I'm for the COVID vaccine, by the way. I really am. I'm just saying as like, as almost like a way of like COVID-19 causing zombification,
I can take this having, background on vaccine creation, implementation, all that kind of stuff. So at least currently with all vaccines that we do, there are tons of rules and regulations, of course. And so whatever vaccine that we know we're going to have to give at the same time as another vaccine. Take, for example, you have a 2-month-old infant. You're going to be giving that infant a DTaP and a rotavirus vaccine, probably also pneumococcal vaccine at the same time. we know that that's when we need to give it. And so before having this vaccine, whether it's for DTaP or for rotavirus or for pneumococcal, we're going to make sure we do plenty of clinical trials, giving those vaccines together to ensure that there are no differences between when we give it as an individual single, like just by itself, and not it's concomitant vaccine like administration, right? So all the vaccines that are being given at the same time have been studied in clinical trials to ensure that there's not going to be some weird interaction between the vaccines that's going to cause some other disease or health issue, whether it be a febrile seizure in the 2-month-old or be, you know, a like Guillain-Barré syndrome, things like that. That all the vaccines that are approved, FDA approved, and on, you know, immunization schedules are going to be that way. Now, if we don't want to have like I don't know of an example of like a vaccine that is not approved at all to be given at a certain age to a certain person who might be immunocompromised. Like that's when we might be seeing bad health effects. But of course, like that's the things we study to make sure we don't do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. You're talking about like long term, like, I mean, so I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. So if I'm not answering it, let me know. But I mean, when it comes to like vaccines, right, you get the vaccine and you're stimulating your immune response to then remember whatever disease you just told your body that you'll probably come across one day. And when you come across it, you're going to be able to get rid of it from your body more easily than if you did not have that vaccine. So I think when it comes to like risks with vaccines being given together, that's where the studies are being taken. I don't think there are going to be I don't know how to explain this. Like risks where you get a vaccine and then 10 years down the line, you're getting another vaccine. Are those two somehow going to interact? No, because you got that vaccine 10 years ago and it's already stimulated your immune response and now you're immune.
The vaccine's not still in your system.
Yeah.
It's now your body has what we call memory cells that are just kind of hanging out in your body waiting to come into contact to the organism that it is supposed to be fighting. But I did want to bounce off of her question and ask if you know, Savannah, if any clinical trials were done with the COVID-19 vaccine and the flu vaccine in like 2020, 2021, because I know that those were co-occurring, and I don't, like, as far as timeline goes, I'm not really sure how
Like two separate ones or the combined?
The two separate ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know people.
Make this quick because we have about 2 minutes
Oh
left.
yes,
So
of
you
course.
have about 1 minute left.
I do not have any clinical trials off the top of my head that I know of when it comes to those. To my understanding, I don't think you're supposed to get both at the same time. That's what my understanding of it is. But I don't know of any like clinical trials per se. What I recommend though, go to the CDC website, look to see what the recommendations are for the flu shot and the COVID shot, and that is going to be the recommendation for you when it comes to those two things. Sorry, I don't know specific ones.
So.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got like 2 minutes left, so I'm going to have to call questions there. If you want to come up afterwards and talk to the panelists, I'm sure they'll all be happy to talk. So final wrap-up, thank you everyone for coming out. The DragonCon is doing the Open Hand Atlanta charity. You're welcome to do tips here because DragonCon is matching up to $100,000, so come make them pay to help people here in Atlanta. Thank you very much. Hope to see you later.
Remember to rate us on the app, okay?